Good morning. Welcome to the Ralph Ellison Foundation online reading series. And I'm so thankful to have with us today Gwendolyn Hooks, who is a prolific author. She's written over 20 wonderful children's books. Writes fiction, nonfiction. She writes in a way that I think help children's students really develop who they are, how they see the world. She is a award-winning author. We would probably sit here for half an hour if I named all the great things she has not only done but been recognized for. And she's a tremendous supporter of the Ralph Ellison Foundation, and she's been so gracious to read to you and me this day. So I'm going to turn it over to Gwen, and thank you so much.
Well, I am very happy to be here. I love books. I love writing books. And I am going to read to you Nathan and the Secret Project. It's a little mystery that I wrote after a trip to Walgreens drugstore. I saw this magazine, The Animal Mind, and I just had to buy it and flip through it and see what it was all about. And it got me to thinking, maybe there's a lot of things that our pets can do that we don't know about just yet. So let me get started. Nathan wished his dad were here. He knew Dad would be on his side. You know what? Started in the wrong place. Chapter 1, the new kid. Nathan wheeled himself into the kitchen. Just in time, his mom said, "I'm making pancakes." Pancakes were Nathan's favorite breakfast, but he hardly had an appetite. It was his first day at his new school, but it was also the last day before spring break. Mom had enrolled Nathan in the new school in their new city the day before. "You'll make friends at school," Mom told him, "and maybe you could hang out with them during spring break." He wanted to say, no one will want to hang out with a boy in a wheelchair, but he didn't. Instead, he said, "Dad would have let me stay home." His mom picked up a stack of pancakes and put them in front of him. "You'll need to get out and meet other kids, and I think you'll love your new teacher." Nathan wished his dad were here. He knew Dad would be on his side, but he was gone on one of his wildlife photography assignments. Nathan pushed his pancakes around on his plate silently, wishing he were back at his old city with his buddies on the wheelchair racing team. "I bet this place doesn't even have a wheelchair racing team," he thought. Just then, Mom jangled her car keys. "Eat, brush, and let's go," she said. Nathan stared out the car window as his mom inched toward the front of the school. She helped Nathan get out and then went to park the car. Nathan looked at the front door. The door didn't seem to have wheelchair access. He had no choice but to wait for his mom. "Ready, Nathan?" Mom asked, grabbing the back of his wheelchair. "I can do it," Nathan snapped. "It's electric, remember?" Suddenly, a girl popped out of the crowd of kids and walked toward him. She had red hair, like the girl in the old movie he and his mom watched together last week. "Are you Nathan? The new kid in Mrs. Spencer's class? She told me to show you around." "I'm Gabby," the girl said. Nathan watched as she pushed a button to open the front door. The button was hidden on the wall beside the door. "Can you go any faster in that thing?" she asked. "We need to get on the elevator before the bell rings. We don't want to be in the middle of everybody trying to get to lockers and classes." Nathan zipped along, trying to keep up. He managed to get through the day. Most of the kids were friendly, but he could tell they wanted to know about the wheelchair. He mostly kept to himself. He wasn't ready to share just yet. Gabby seemed to pop up everywhere. She even beat him to Mom's car at the end of the day. "Let's tell your mom that we will walk home together. I live a block away from you." "How do you know where I live?" Gabby grinned. "I saw you move in." Nathan wanted only to sit in his room, remembering his old life, remembering KD. Mom told Gabby, "That's a great idea. And why don't you come over later? It's pizza night. There's plenty for 3. Chapter 2, Something Creepy. After pizza, Mom suggested they go to the dog festival at the park. I'd rather finish my book, Nathan said. Mom gave him the look that said, get ready, you're going. Dog festival? His mom should have known he wasn't ready. There would never be another dog like Katie. But Gabby was already calling her mother for permission to go. As they made their way through the park, Nathan wished he could get away from Gabby. She seemed to know everyone in the park. Hi, Mr. Tram, she said, waving to a man who reminded Nathan of his grandpa. But Grandpa had a big toothy smile. This guy didn't smile back at them. He had a sour pickle look on his face. He stopped and blinked at them and kept walking. His legs were as skinny as number 2 pencils. He wore wide shoes that left footprints in the grass, although it had not rained. Then Mr. Tram sat next to a lady in a red dress sharing a blanket with an energized chocolate poodle. Mr. Tram held the poodle's head and stared into its eyes. Is he trying to hypnotize it? Nathan wondered. The poodle grew quiet and laid his head on the man's lap. Creepy. As Nathan looked around the park, it made him think about family picnics with Katie. He blinked and looked at the video of dogs filling the big screen, but he couldn't focus. Nathan watched as the lady got up. She walked toward the food trucks. Mr. Tram still held the poodle. He looked into its eyes again. Then he walked away, leading the poodle on a leash, as if they were at the dog show. Did you see that? Nathan asked. See what? Gabby looked around. Mr. Tram's. Nathan whirled his wheelchair in a circle. He couldn't see Mr. Tram's in the crowd. He just walked off with that woman's dog. Shh, Gabby said. You're going to miss the videos. Music continued to blare along with the videos of dogs that filled the big screen. The owner of the poodle returned, packed up her blanket, and left the park in another direction from Mr. Tram's and her dog. That's strange, Nathan thought. Why would Mr. Tram's walk off with her dog? Why wasn't she upset? Maybe she was dog sitting for him. Does Mr. Tram's have a dog? Nathan asked. No, Gabby replied. Why do you ask? Chapter 2, The Secret Project. Did you always need a wheelchair? Gabby asked the next day. No, he said. He quickly changed the subject. How far is the comic book store? Nathan didn't want to talk about the day he lost his best friend and his world changed forever. It's not far, Gabby said. Nathan looked down at his wheelchair. He was worried about his wheelchair getting there. There are sidewalks all the way, smooth ones, said Gabby, noticing his downward glance. Nathan looked down at his wheelchair again. That's one of the reasons they had moved here. There were smooth sidewalks and elevators in the schools, his mom had said. He glanced up at Gabby, but she was staring at a bus stopped at a red light. Nathan followed her gaze. Mr. Trams was sitting by the window on the bus. A golden retriever was sitting next to him, looking out the window. Then Mr. Tram slowly turned and looked straight at Nathan. Nathan's face felt hot. Got another dog, Gabby said. He's still creepy, said Nathan, and rubbed his cheek. I bet he lives in a weird house. He actually lives only right down the block, said Gabby. Let's check it out. Mr. Trams lived in the only house with a fence on his block. Soon they were on the walking trail, going slowly past his house in the backyard, trying to get a view of the back of the house. The wooden fence guarded both sides of the back from the paths. A glass back door was prominent on a raised porch. I think I see something moving, Nathan said, shifting his body a little and moving his head from side to side. It's another dog, said Gabby. She could see farther than Nathan. Golly, you know, I've never seen Mr. Trams walk or even play with dogs before. Now suddenly he has 3, Nathan asked. Actually 5, Gabby said. 2 Jack Russell Terriers are sitting at the back door. They're so cute. I wish we could play with them. Maybe their owners do too, said Nathan. Suddenly, Nathan saw a bigger shadow moving from behind the glass door. It definitely wasn't a dog. Come on, let's get out of here, he said as he moved his wheelchair forward. I think Mr. Trams is back at home. Don't you think Mr. Trams is a little odd, Nathan asked? You said you've never seen him with any dogs, and now he has a house full of them? Something strange is going on there, a real mystery. He took out a notebook and asked Gabby, what do you know about him? I don't think he has any family, she said. He doesn't drive a car. He loves the library. I see him there almost every time I go. He always has a table to himself with a big stack of books. Nathan asked, what kind of books? I don't know. One, said Gabby. She thought for a moment. If we spy on him at the library, we can see what kind of books he reads. He checks out some, but there are always a few left on the table. Let's go then, Nathan said. This spring break is the best ever, and I was worried about being bored, said Gabby. Nathan grinned. Maybe this move wouldn't be so bad after all, now that he has a secret project. Chapter 4, Going Undercover. Mr. Trams wasn't at the library yet, so Gabby took the opportunity to show Nathan around. Then they heard the librarian say, Thank you for the gardening tips, Dr. Trams. I'll definitely win first place at the flower show. Dr. Trams smiled at the librarian. His smile almost seemed normal, but his face quickly changed back to that sour pickle look. I had no idea that he's a doctor, Nathan said, heading toward the librarian's desk. What kind of doctor is he? Dr. Trams is a research scientist. He has all sorts of college degrees, said the librarian. What kind of research? Nathan asked. Animal behavior, said the librarian. We need to check out what he's reading, Nathan said to Gabby. Where does he usually sit? He must be really smart, said Gabby, peeking around a corner. We better be careful. Nathan rolled to a table where they saw Dr. Tram's back. They watched the doctor reading thick books and writing in a notebook. Does the same thing I do when I'm working on a school project, Nathan thought to himself. What is he studying? Does it have anything to do with dogs? Let's get a couple of books so we fit in, Nathan whispered. Great idea. Gabby left and a few minutes later came back with a stack of cookbooks. Nathan looked at the titles and then at Gabby. She shrugged. They're the first ones I saw. Nathan flipped through Tasty Meals with Kale, Carrots, and Kohlrabi. What's Kohlrabi? No idea, said Gabby. My mom doesn't know. Hopefully my mom doesn't know either. Kohlrabi, a delightful vegetable. Nathan and Gabby both jumped, seeing Dr. Tram standing over their table, pointing to Nathan's book. He smiled and turned toward the front desk. They waited until Dr. Trams was gone and then went over to his table. Creepy, Nathan said. Let's see what he has been reading. Nathan picked up How Animals Think, Understanding the Thoughts of an Elephant. Gabby held up a book. The title was What's on a Dog's Mind? We need to do more research. How can we make sure he isn't putting dogs in any kind of danger? Maybe we can go back to his house. I let my dog out in the backyard. Maybe he does too. You have a dog? Gabby asked. Nathan slowed his wheelchair. I had a dog. Gabby was silent. His name was KD. One day I was practicing my jump shots in our driveway where Dad had set up a basketball net. KD was running around trying to get the ball. I made a shot. The ball bounced off the rim and rolled into the street. KD ran after it. I ran after KD. A car turned the corner. Now KD is gone and I'm in a wheelchair. Gabby sighed and looked away. I bet Katie would want us to find out exactly what Dr. Trams is up to. Nathan was glad she didn't say how sorry she was. Everyone always said that they were sorry. Chapter 5, Tram's Secret Project. An hour later, they settled into their hiding place off the biking trail behind Dr. Tram's house. Suddenly, the door opened. Something is about to happen, Nathan thought, picking up his binoculars. Dr. Tram squeezed out from behind the door. He scattered 10 sheets of white poster board across the yard. Then he opened the door wider, and the dogs ran out. Looking through his binoculars, Nathan thought he saw words and pictures drawn on the poster boards. The boards were flat, so he wasn't sure. What was the doctor up to? Dr. Trams walked over to one of the posters and held it up. For once, the man seemed excited. He didn't look so scary as he smiled and called the chocolate poodle over to him. The poodle ran to a large basket and then, with a stuffed bear in its mouth, ran back to Dr. Trams. Dr. Trams shook his head. The dog carried the bear back to the basket and returned with a large stuffed pear. Dr. Trams gave the dog a treat. Then Dr. Trams motioned to a border collie and picked up a different poster. The border collie ran to the basket and pulled up a hat. The dog ran to the doctor. The dog got a treat. Next, one of the terriers bounced onto the doctor's lap. He looked at the poster. Dr. Tram showed him and then ran to the big basket. The dog darted back for his treat. Soon, all the dogs had earned a treat. Nathan whispered, "I wish we could see what's on those poster boards." Dr. Trams began to pick up all the posters. He paused. Nathan and Gabby watched as Dr. Trams walked over to the fence. You two seem to like spying on me," he said in a loud voice. Gabby held her breath. "What's on your posters?" Nathan asked, the binoculars shaking in his hands. "Why don't you come and see?" Dr. Tram said. He opened the gate. Gabby helped Nathan go carefully down the hill to Dr. Tram's yard. The dogs were happily running around. Dr. Trams held up one of his posters. "Words!" Nathan exclaimed. There, written on Dr. Tram's poster, was the word lion. Dr. Trams motioned over to the golden retriever. He held up the sign. Nathan and Gabby watched as the dog picked up a stuffed lion from the basket. He brought it back to Dr. Trams. "Wow," Gabby said. "The dogs can read." "It wasn't quick or easy to train them," Dr. Trams explained, "but the dogs always have a good time." "Is this what you did at the Intelligent Animal Brain Institute?" asked Nathan. "Yes, I see you did your research. You two are real detectives," Dr. Trams said, laughing. "But I'm working on my own research project. I want to know if dogs can learn to read using cues from our body language. Getting to know what's in their minds could let us know what they're thinking." "Can we be your assistants?" asked Gabby. "If it's okay with your parents, I really need help talking to the dogs and taking them for walks. And I bet that Hero, the border collie, would love to race with you, Nathan," said Dr. Trams. Nathan nuzzled Hero's ears. It was the first time he had pet a dog since he had lost KD. "I'd love to race Hero," Nathan said. "I'll even let him win." And that is the end of Nathan and the Secret Project.
Well, that was wonderful. I am trying to locate the buttons down here.
Oh,
You know, the new technology we're in right now is, I think, is a little challenging for all of us. But
if you're of a certain age, I call my daughters all the time and say, "Oh, Mama, that's so easy. Do this, this, and this." I said, "Okay."
Well, Gwen, thank you so much. But in closing, could you just talk a little bit about just why you started writing and what keeps you writing?
Why I started writing, because I was always a reader. All the kids in my family, my sister, my brother, we always spent time at the library, mainly because that was the one place we know our parents would say, yes, you could go to without all this, well, who are the parents? Are the parents home? Blah, blah, blah. Can we go to the library? Yes, you may go to the library. So we were always readers. And I don't think I thought about writing until I had started teaching math and I was on maternity leave, still reading. And I thought to myself, I think I may be able to write some of this. So that's when I started writing, and didn't get published right away. It took lots of manuscripts, lots of no's, but I read that other authors, established authors, got no's. So I said, okay, I'm not going to let that stop me. I'll just keep going and keep going. And at first I wanted to write for adults, but I realized that wasn't my calling. So I switched to children and I suddenly felt this is where I belong. So I just kept at it, didn't take the rejections too seriously, went to a lot of conferences, met other writers, and that's how I ended up here.
Wonderful. Well, we're so blessed to have you, and I appreciate and I'm looking forward to you coming back in the future and reading another one of your books, and always looking forward to seeing you once we're out of this pandemic thing. And
I know.
no, and folks, again, Gwendolyn Hooks here reading and for our online series, Ralph Ellison Foundation. For more information about the Ralph Ellison Foundation, you can go to ralphellisonfoundation.org. Thank you so much for watching.
Thank you.